Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Could the time of day your body bumps into an infection actually change how well you fight it off? What if something like daylight, simple daylight, could actually power up your immune system's front line? Let's jump into this. Today we're doing a deep dive into this really fascinating new study. It's looking at this, surprising link between light, our body clocks, and our immune system's first responders.
Yeah, it's pretty compelling stuff.
We've taken apart a health news piece and a pretty detailed scientific paper to get at how daylight seems to supercharge a key part of our bacterial defense. So this deep dive is for you, pulling out the crucial bits from this research.
And it's really quite something how deep these daily rhythms go. Not just sleep, right, but down to how individual cells work, like the ones fighting infection.
Exactly.
So the researchers here, they wanted to pin down how the immune system actually synchronizes with light and dark cycles, and what difference that makes when fighting bacteria.
That's the core question, isn't it? Is there a direct line from the sun coming up to how ready our immune cells are?
Yeah.
And to get at that, they used zebrafish.
They did. Zebrafish are, they're great for this kind of work. Their genetics, surprisingly similar to ours in many ways, so the findings often have relevance.
Okay.
But the really neat trick is that they can be transparent, which means scientists can literally watch biological stuff happening inside a living fish in real time, like immune cells moving around.
Like watching the defense system live in action.
Yeah.
And they mess with the lighting, right? Different schedules.
Exactly. Regular day-night, constant light, constant dark, even flip the schedule completely just to see how the outside light was talking to the inside.
Okay.
Then they'd introduce an infection, often salmonella bacteria, put into a visible spot like the fish's brain or near its ear structure, and then they watched.
Watch what specifically?
They tracked specific white blood cells, mainly neutrophils and macrophages. Where did they go? What did they do?
Neutrophils.
Yeah.
Those are the rapid responders, yeah. The first ones on the scene.
That's right. Most common type of white blood cell, they get there fast, engulf bacteria, destroy them. So using live imaging, the researchers could measure how well these neutrophils killed bacteria. And they also tracked the production of something called reactive oxygen species.
Okay, let's spell that out for everyone. Reactive oxygen species. REACTIVEOXYGEN These are like biological bleach used to kill pathogens.
That's a good analogy. They're potent weapons. High levels mean the neutrophil is really fighting hard.
Got it.
And they didn't just watch, they intervened, used genetic tools to make mutant fish missing key clock genes, like period 2 or cryptochrome 1A.
The gears of the internal clock.
Exactly. Or they'd boost gene levels or even edit genes just inside the neutrophils themselves.
So they isolate the clock's effect specifically in those immune cells.
Precisely. Trying to see, if you tweak the clock inside the neutrophil, how does that change its job performance? They also looked at wider gene activity, RNA sequencing, and scanned the DNA for spots where clock proteins might latch on.
Okay, quite the toolkit. So after all that, what was the big takeaway? What was the connection between light and immunity here?
Well, it started with an observation. One of the lead researchers, Associate Professor Christopher Hall, mentioned that in earlier work, they saw immune responses peaking in the morning for the fish, their active time.
Right.
Which led to the hypothesis that maybe this evolved because the fish are more active in daylight, more likely to encounter bacteria then.
Ah, okay. So it makes evolutionary sense to have your defenses highest when you're most likely to need them.
Exactly. And the central finding here, it's the neutrophils themselves. They have their own internal timer, like a cellular clock, tuned to daytime. And this clock actually boosts their bacteria-killing power during the day.
Wait, so the neutrophil isn't just getting orders from the brain saying it's morning. It knows itself. It has its own clock telling it to power up.
That seems to be what's happening, yeah. And they found key parts of this clockwork. One crucial protein is period 2. Turns out, period 2 is absolutely required inside the neutrophil for it to kill bacteria well and make those reactive oxygen species.
How'd they show that?
Well, fish engineered to lack period 2. Their neutrophils were, frankly, pretty bad at killing bacteria. But if they restored period 2 just in the neutrophils, bang, the killing function came back. And a specific part of that period 2 protein was key.
Interesting. And what about the other one, cryptochrome 1A? You mentioned that too.
Right, cryptochrome 1A. This one seems to do, the opposite. When neutrophils were missing cryptochrome 1A, they actually got better at killing bacteria and made more reactive oxygen species.
Huh. So period 2 is like the go signal for strong daytime killing, and cryptochrome 1A acts like a bit of a break, maybe.
That's a really good way to think about it. They seem to work in opposition, period 2 and cryptochrome 1A within the neutrophil's clock, to fine-tune its infection-fighting ability based on time.
Okay, got the push and pull. What about that other gene they flagged, high mobility group box 1A?
Ah, yes. High mobility group box 1A, let's spell it. HIGH hyphen MOBILITY GROUP BOX 1A. Big name. They found its levels were way down in those period 2 deficient neutrophils after infection.
But not normal ones.
Right. And just like with period 2, if they put high mobility group box 1A back, specifically in the neutrophils, the killing ability was restored. We know this high mobility group box 1A is involved in immune responses. It can trigger reactive oxygen species. The thinking is the neutrophil makes it, and it acts back on the neutrophil itself to ramp up the weapons.
Okay, so period 2 ensures high mobility group box 1A gets made during an infection, and that signal then boosts the neutrophil's killing power.
That seems to be the sequence. Now, the light connection. How does light get involved in making more high mobility group box 1A? They tracked it to a specific bit of DNA near the high mobility group box 1A gene. It's called a conserved cis-regulatory element.
Let's break that down. Conserved, meaning similar across species, and cis-regulatory element, CRE, that's like a DNA switch controlling the gene.
Exactly right on both counts. And this particular CRE is interesting because it has docking spots for different proteins, including clock proteins like BMAL1.
BMAL1.
And also proteins linked to infection response like nuclear factor kappa B.
Nuclear factor kappa B and F hyphen key B. That pops up a lot in inflammation and infection.
It does. And here's the key. If they tweaked the DNA so BMAL1 couldn't bind to that CRE switch, the neutrophils couldn't ramp up high mobility group box 1A properly in response to light and infection, and their killing ability dropped.
Wow. Okay, that is quite a detailed mechanism inside one tiny cell. Can you maybe walk us through the whole chain again? Daylight to better bacteria killing.
Okay, let's try. So during the day, the neutrophil's internal clock is in a certain state. Period 2 is up, and it's kind of counteracting cryptochrome 1A's dampening effect.
Right, the balance shifts.
Yeah. This allows clock proteins like BMAL1 to team up with infection sensors like nuclear factor kappa B right there at that special DNA switch, the CRE, near the high mobility group box 1A gene.
Okay.
So the cell is basically primed. When an infection hits during this daytime primed state, that teamwork at the DNA switch triggers a big surge in high mobility group box 1A production.
Signal molecule.
Exactly. And that high mobility group box 1A then tells a neutrophil, okay, full power, make lots of reactive oxygen species, the killing molecules. So daylight, through this clock mechanism, sets the stage for a faster, stronger neutrophil attack.
That's incredibly intricate, showing how something like the sun cycle gets wired right into how our cells work. So zooming out, what are the big implications here? What does this mean for, us?
Well, fundamentally, it shows how our key immune cells use their own clocks to be better at their jobs at certain times. It helps explain why your body's defense against bacteria might naturally ebb and flow over 24 hours.
Potentially strongest during the day.
Which evolutionarily makes sense. That's often when we, or animals, are out and about, more likely to encounter pathogens.
So it's not just feeling more awake, it's like our immune cells are literally more on alert at a molecular level.
That's the idea. And the potential therapeutic angle is really interesting. Professor Hall was quoted saying this paves the way for the development of drugs that target the circadian clock in neutrophils to boost their ability to fight infections.
So maybe future treatments could tweak this clock.
Possibly. Or maybe it's about timing treatments better. Imagine boosting a patient's neutrophil response or timing antibiotics when their natural defenses are already peaking. It could be relevant for bacterial infections, maybe even inflammatory diseases where neutrophils are involved.
That does open up some really fascinating possibilities.
Yeah.
But okay, science is always ongoing.
Sure.
What were the limitations? What questions are still out there?
Always questions left. One thing they mentioned was while they saw the gene activity changing, they couldn't directly measure the actual protein levels. Period 2, cryptochrome 1A, BMAL1 inside the neutrophils over a full day. Or see exactly where they were, like in the nucleus.
Seeing the proteins themselves, yeah, that would add another layer.
Definitely. And practically doing this kind of live imaging in human neutrophils is just much, much harder than in transparent zebrafish.
Right. And didn't you say neutrophils don't live very long? Less than a day.
Exactly. Which raises an interesting point. Their internal clock might not be a classic 24-hour cycle within one cell's life. It could be more like a timer.
A timer. How so?
Well, maybe it functions to coordinate the whole population of neutrophils, ensuring that collectively they have heightened activity during the daytime rather than each cell cycling through a full 24 hours, like synchronizing the army for peak readiness at the expected battle time.
Okay, so it's orchestrating the group effort across the day. That makes sense.
It seems plausible. They also noted they haven't mapped out every single step between high mobility group box 1A getting switched on and the reactive oxygen species actually being produced. They know the signal, but the exact downstream mechanics, still some gaps there.
Still a bit of the how missing in that specific step.
Yeah. And the big caveat always is that these are fantastic results, and some parts like the CRE and high mobility group box 1A seem conserved, but it is zebrafish. We absolutely need more research to see how perfectly this translates to human neutrophils, human immunity.
Okay, so this deep dive has really shown us an amazing, quite complex mechanism. How daylight, working through this internal neutrophil clock period 2, cryptochrome 1A, and key genes like high mobility group box 1A, effectively primes these crucial immune cells to be better bacterial fighters during the day.
It really does highlight how tied our biology is to our environment, down to the cellular level, even for something as vital as fighting infection.
Absolutely. So given that our bodies seem naturally tuned for better defense when we're active, here's something for you to think about. How might really understanding these deep biological rhythms change how we approach health? Could it influence everything from when we take medicine to maybe even how we design our homes and workplaces to better sync with our internal clocks? Definitely something to mull over until our next deep dive.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.